I never thought I'd be the type of woman who could do something like this. I suppose that's how most women like me feel before they cross that invisible line, the line between who they are and who they secretly want to be. Before this, I was a faithful wife, a woman who followed the rules, who played her part. If someone had told me a year ago that I would be standing outside a hotel room, heartbeat drumming in my ears, waiting to meet a man who was not my husband, I would have laughed in their face. And yet, here I am. The weight of my decisions presses down on me, but not in the way you'd expect. There is no regret, no panic. If anything, my pulse quickens in anticipation, in the heady rush of knowing that in a few moments I will step into something I cannot take back, a moment that will live with me forever, whether I admit it or not. But how did I get here? It wasn't a sudden thing. Affairs never are, no matter how people like to tell the story. There was no single moment where I decided to do this. It started as a whisper in the back of my mind, so quiet I could ignore it. Then the whisper turned into a thought. Then the thought turned into a hunger. And once hunger sets in, ignoring it only makes it worse. I met my husband, Daniel, when I was 24. I was wild, then fearless, in the way that only young women can be. I had my share of experiences, flings that burned hot and fast, but Daniel was different. He was safe, solid, the kind of man you could build a life with. And I did. We married 4 years later, and for a while everything was exactly as it should be. We had a nice home, good friends, a comfortable life. I loved him. Truly, he was my partner, my best friend. But friendship is not the same as passion. In the beginning, the sex was good, maybe not the kind that sets the world on fire, but good enough. But as the years passed, routine settled in, the spontaneity faded, the heat cooled, and before I knew it, our intimate life became just another part of the weekly to-do list. I told myself it was normal. Every married couple goes through this. I read articles about how intimacy changes, how you have to work at it, and I did. I tried, but there was something inside me that refused to be satisfied, a part of me that still craved more. At night, when Daniel fell asleep beside me, I found myself wide awake, staring at the ceiling, my body buzzing with something I couldn't quite name. I started watching things online, not just anything specific, things that made my breath hitch, that sent shivers down my spine. I told myself it was harmless, a fantasy, just something to take the edge off. But then I saw him, Jake Stone. That was his stage name, though I doubted it was his real one. He wasn't just an actor, he was a presence, the kind of man who didn't just perform but commanded every second of what he was doing. I watched him once, then twice, then again. I told myself it was nothing, just curiosity, but it wasn't, because every time I saw him I imagined myself in the place of the women he touched. I imagined what it would be like to be handled like that, to be completely taken, completely undone. It was more than just ATT traction, it was an obsession. I started looking up interviews, anything I could find. That's when I learned that he did more than just act. He offered private sessions for those who could afford it. At first I laughed at the idea. Who does that? I thought, who actually pays for something like this? But the more I thought about it, the more I wondered why not. It started as a joke in my head, a what if, but the idea refused to leave me. I started looking into it, reading through the discreet, carefully worded website where bookings were handled. It was expensive, more than I had ever spent on something purely for myself, but the price only made it more tempting. I imagined what it would be like. One night, no consequences, an experience, not an affair. And then one night, after too much wine, my fingers hovered over the keyboard, heart hammering as I filled out the inquiry form. One night, no strings, no regrets. I hit send. I woke up the next morning half convinced that I had dreamed the whole thing, but when I checked my email, my stomach clenched. Confirmed tomorrow night, Hotel Sapphire, 9:00 p.m. I stared at the words, my breath coming in short bursts. I could still back out. Nothing was set in stone, but I didn't want to. The guilt tried to creep in, but I shoved it away. It wasn't about love or betrayal. It wasn't about Daniel. This was about me, about the part of me I had buried, the part that still longed to feel something more than routine. I told Daniel I was meeting an old college friend for dinner. He barely looked up from his phone when He told me to have fun if only he knew. By the time I arrived at Hotel Sapphire, my nerves were electric. The lobby was sleek, modern, filled with the quiet hum of conversations and the distant clink of glasses. I felt like a stranger in my own body, walking toward the elevator, with the weight of my secret pressing against my skin. I rode up in silence, watching the numbers tick higher. My hands trembled as I held the keycard between my fingers. Room 614. I stood outside the door for what felt like an eternity, my breath shallow, my thoughts spinning. This was it. All I had to do was swipe the keycard, step inside, and cross the line I had never dared to cross before. I pressed the card against the lock. A soft click. The door swung open, and inside, waiting for me, was the man I had only ever seen through a screen. Tonight, he was real, and tonight, he was mine. The door swung open, and there he was, Jake Stone. He looked exactly as he did on screen, yet somehow more real, more intense, more intimidating. The room was dimly lit, with only the soft glow from the bedside lamp casting shadows against the walls. He stood near the window, hands casually tucked into the pockets of his dark slacks, watching me. His presence was overwhelming, not just in size, but in the way he occupied the space. He had this quiet confidence, this control that I had only ever seen in his performances, and now it was directed at me. I stepped inside, hesitantly, letting the door close behind me. The sound of it latching sent a shiver down my spine. There was no turning back. Now I swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how small I felt under his gaze. I had spent weeks fantasizing about this moment, but now that I was here, my nerves tangled into something I couldn't untangle. You're nervous, he said, his voice deep, smooth, completely at ease. I let out a shaky laugh. Is it that obvious? He smirked a little. There was something about the way he looked at me, like he already knew me. Not just the way I looked, but the way I felt. He had done this before. That much was clear. He knew exactly how to handle women like me, women who wanted to
explore something they couldn't admit out loud, women who crave something just beyond their reach. I took a deep breath and forced myself to move further into the room. I guess this is the part where I say something witty to cover up the fact that I have no idea what I'm doing. He chuckled, stepping closer. You don't have to say anything, you're here, that's enough. I nodded, but my throat was dry. The reality of what I was about to do weighed heavily on me. I wasn't just watching anymore. I wasn't just a spectator to my own fantasies. I was about to step into them. Jake tilted his head, studying me. This your first time? I hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, first time. Cheating? He asked bluntly. I flinched at the word cheating. It sounded so ugly, so simple, like it was